They tell you, when you sign up for the journalism elective, that you're supposed to pick stories that matter. True crime matters. People listen when you talk about true crime. A little bit of background. I'm Claudia. I'm 24, a theater major who wandered into a journalism workshop because narrative nonfiction sounded like an easy A and maybe a way to write better monologues. Instead, I got a 40-page syllabus, ethics codes, deadlines, and a professor who says lead like it's holy scripture. I wanted to hate it, I really did. Somewhere between the lectures on structure and the deep dives into old features, I realized I liked it. I really liked it. It scratched a part that my theater girl brain never quite reached. The hunt. The way real life could be cut and arranged into scenes. The illusion that if you just ask enough questions, you can make something sharp and complete out of chaos. For our final, Professor Halperin told us to pick a cold case or unresolved mystery and build a multimedia deep dive around it. Documents, interviews, audio. The more immersive, the better. I opened my mouth before I could stop myself and called Zodiac. People groaned. Someone muttered something about, of course. I didn't care. I've been obsessed with the Zodiac killer since I was 15 and fell into a Wikipedia hole at 3 a.m. like every other anxious teen with Wi-Fi. The hood, the symbol, the letters with their stupid little jokes. It felt like a horror movie that refused to roll credits. Also, I live in the Bay. I've been to some of those places. They're just names on a bus schedule now. But if you say them out loud in the right company, people still flinch. My roommate Sophie, also a theater major, always overscheduled and permanently sticky with stage makeup from our production of Hair, made a face at me after class. I love her. She wanted to know why I didn't pick something fun like D.B. Cooper or the Patterson-Gimlin film. Something with missing money or blurry footage instead of actual bodies. I told her it was perfect. Tapes, letters, creepy sketches, suspects for days. The original extended cinematic universe. She warned me not to turn into one of those true crime sleuths making conspiracy theories about Arthur Lee Allen's shoe size. I promised I wouldn't. I was already mentally choosing fonts. Social media makes research look glamorous. That cute girl with a latte and the open laptop, fake reading in perfect lighting. Yeah, that's not it. Real research is fluorescence, dust, and your spine turning into a question mark over a microfilm machine. Our campus library has a decent local archive. It also has a librarian who, when I said I was working on the Zodiac, paused just a fraction too long and said, "They get a lot of requests." I joked that I was surprised it wasn't a major. She didn't laugh. I started with the basics, the letters, the police bulletins, the stuff every documentary drags out with dramatic music. The first time I saw the ciphers blown up on paper instead of a tiny JPEG on my phone, they made my teeth hurt. You know the ones. Circles, triangles, weird little boxes, backward letters. The 408 cipher a school teacher and his wife solved over a weekend. The later ones nobody's cracked. They're basically American pop culture now, slapped on t-shirts and podcast thumbnails. Up close, though, they're ugly, aggressive. The symbols don't sit politely inside the little grid boxes. They crowd and lean into each other. Some have those tiny hooks at the ends, like the writer couldn't quite lift the pen, like the motion wanted to keep going. I traced a line of them in the air over the page. Not actually touching because the librarian had warned me about oils from your skin. My fingertip tingled anyway, the way your tongue does when you touch a battery. That night I dreamed about handwriting. Not words, just shapes. I was in our black box theater, but instead of an audience, there were rows of empty folding chairs. On each seat, a page of cipher. I knew somehow that my job was to read them out loud, not translate, perform. My mouth tried to make sounds that didn't belong in any language I knew. My tongue felt too thick. Somewhere in the back row, something laughed. Not at me. Excited. When I woke up, my nose was bleeding, just a few drops on the pillowcase. Sophie saw it after her run and told me I needed to stop doing murder homework at 2 in the morning because my brain was leaking out. She asked if I was starting a Zodiac fan club. I told her not unless snacks were involved. I didn't tell her about the dream. The next step was interviews. Halperin wanted at least 3 sources with direct connection to the case. That's hard when your case is older than your parents, but not impossible. We're in the Bay. This story has roots everywhere. I emailed everyone, retired cops, surviving family members, armchair sleuths who turned their obsession into a brand. Most never replied. A few gave polite no thank yous. One reply came in at 2:17 in the morning from a retired Vallejo detective named Redacted Larkin. He said he didn't do interviews about that anymore. Not for TV, not for podcasts, not for kids who treat it like a spooky legend. He told me if I was smart, I'd pick something else. I stared at the email while the fridge hummed and Sophie sang something from Hair, very badly in the shower. Then I wrote back that I wasn't a kid and I wasn't trying to turn it into a ghost story. I wanted to write about how we tell stories about violence, about the case as a narrative that eats its own tail. I promised I'd be respectful. Even 20 minutes of his time would help. I hovered over send and caught my reflection in the dark monitor. Ink on my wrist, dark circles under my eyes. Behind me, in the screen's reflection, the closet door stood open a crack. There was something in the gap. Tall, blocky, hooded. I whipped around fast enough that my chair squealed. In the closet were just clothes, my dresses on one side, Sophie's 70s shirts and fringe and chaos on the other. No hood, no symbol. When I looked back at the monitor, my reflection lagged a half second. The closet door in the reflection was closed. I told myself I was tired and hit send. Larkin agreed to meet, but only on neutral ground, which turned out to be a downtown diner that smelled like burnt coffee and sugar. He had cop posture, back to the wall, eyes on the door. He recognized me immediately and said I walked like I was hitting marks. I decided I liked him. I'm not going to write out every word he said. That's not what this is. But I'll tell you the parts that matter. He talked about inheriting Zodiac files, how it felt like being handed a cursed baton. He mentioned the usual suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, and said if he had to put money on anyone, it'd probably be him, but that he'd seen too many men fit too many boxes. The symbol on the watch, the proximity, the timing, it all works until it doesn't. There's DNA on the stamps that doesn't match him, unless you believe he had someone else lick them. What stuck with me wasn't who he thought did it. It was what he told me not to do. He asked me if I'd ever read the letters out loud. I told him no because I hadn't. He told me not to. He said there were patterns they couldn't put in reports because they sounded crazy. Guys who worked the case too long got strange. One had what the department called a psychotic episode. One killed himself. A clerk who handled the letters developed night terrors about a man in a hood at the corner of his bed. He said he thought words had weight. You put them in the right order, they become more than themselves. That's why people love award-winning narrative and not bullet points. Then he told me very specifically, don't read them out loud, don't copy them by hand, don't decide you're going to be the one who cracks the secret message, let it stay dead. I asked him if he'd ever seen anything himself. His jaw locked. The interview was over. He walked out so fast it was like I'd flipped a switch. A few days later, my professor forwarded me an email from a local public radio station. They'd heard about the class project and wanted to let us dig through old reel-to-reel tapes, news segments, call-ins, anything Zodiac adjacent. Perfect atmosphere for my piece, he said. The building was ugly concrete, the kind of place that looks like it smells like toner. A grad student intern with huge headphones walked me down to the archive. Long room, metal shelves, rows of tapes, everything faintly humming with age. He showed me how to work the player and left me with a paper log. The first reel I picked was a 1969 newscast about Vallejo. Tinny male voice, lots of alleged and shocking violence. The second was callers arguing about whether Zodiac was a hoax or one guy or government psyops. The third was just a number with a scribble on the log. Unknown pos. Letter reading. I hit play. At first, nothing but hiss. Then, breathing, too close to the mic. A man's voice came in, careful and slow, like an old radio announcer. He said, "At last you will listen." The man began to read. It wasn't one of the text letters. It was the first cipher. I recognized the pattern. 3 rows, 8 columns, symbols like a drunk alien alphabet. Only he wasn't saying English words. Hell, he wasn't speaking any language. He was making sounds. Clicks. Hisses. Little bursts that weren't quite consonants, weren't quite vowels. Some slid up into frequencies that made my teeth hurt. The fluorescent lights over my head flickered. I told myself it was bad ballasts. I kept listening. Under his voice, something scraped, like a chair dragged slowly across concrete in another room. My skin crawled. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When he reached the end of wherever line he was on, he laughed. It was wrong, like someone trying to imitate human amusement using sliders. Too high, then too low, warbling between both. I slammed stop. The room went still. The lights stopped flickering. The tape machine clicked as it came to rest. On the far wall was a framed vintage poster under glass. In its reflection, over my shoulder, I saw someone standing behind me. Tall, shoulder-wide, a hood shaped almost like a cereal box covered in fabric. A white circle and cross right at chest level. It looked exactly like the costume described by a surviving victim. I turned around so hard I almost knocked the machine over. Empty aisle, metal shelves, closed door. I looked back at the glass. For a heartbeat, the hooded figure was still there, clearer now, like he'd leaned forward. Then he wasn't. By the time Sophie got home from rehearsal that night, the kitchen table was buried in ciphers. I'd convinced the librarian to let me scan and enlarge them, and I was tracing the symbols with a fine-tip pen like I could soak them into my bones through repetition. She walked in, took one look and said, "Absolutely not." She reminded me I'd promised no reading them out loud, no code breaking in my free time. I told her I wasn't reading them. Technically true. I was whispering. I said I was just trying to understand the structure, shape-wise. She said my voice sounded calm, but my eyeballs looked like they'd seen God. She pointed out that I'd been forgetting to eat, that I hummed something weird in my sleep, that I'd written, "This is the Zodiac speaking," on our grocery list in all caps. I tried to laugh and say it was a joke. Even to my own ears, it sounded weak. Behind her, in the dark kitchen window, I saw our reflections. 2 tired girls, a table full of Xeroxed murder. And behind my reflected shoulder, him again. Hood, symbol. Closer this time, the circle cross faintly glowing like something catching a stage light. My breath hitched. She started to turn to look and asked what I'd seen. By the time she did, it was just our courtyard, glass and dark. She told me quietly that she thought she saw someone too. I didn't sleep that night. When I finally drifted off just before dawn, I dreamed he was standing at the foot of my bed. Hood, symbol, nothing behind the eye holes but layers of dark. He lifted his hand and touched the tip of a pen to the center of my chest. I woke up gasping, clutching at my sternum like there'd be a wound. There was nothing. Just a hot ache under the skin, like a bruise thinking about existing. The deeper I dug, the less it felt like a case, and the more it felt like a story that had been running since long before the 1960s and was just using that era as its most popular act. Handwriting experts in old reports said the letters didn't all look like the same person wrote them. Not just disguise, but different authorship qualities, like someone consciously shifting style between each letter. Some early suspects, people they eventually cleared, went on to have breakdowns. Psych issues. One of them was Arthur Lee Allen. In a psych note I shouldn't have had access to, the university's sloppy. A doctor scribbled that Allen reported recurring dreams of a hooded figure with a circle cross on his chest standing in the corner of his room. The doctor added there was no evidence Alan ever owned such an outfit. I read that 5 times. When I tried to tell Halperin that maybe the article wasn't going to be about who Zodiac was, but about how the idea of him infects people, he smiled and called it a very theater major take. I found it both cute and mildly inconvenient. He told me to focus on what I could prove, that the dead shouldn't be treated like props. The 1890s came out of nowhere. I was in the basement, scrolling microfilm of coverage from the 60s, when an older headline on the same reel caught my eye, probably misfiled. 1923. Families murdered near Mare Island. Below a strange sign, there was a blurry photo of a barn wall, chalked on it, big and clumsy, a circle with a cross in the middle. I went back. I found more. 1911. Painter dead in his studio, same symbol on the floor. 1902. Letters to an Oakland family defaced with occult astrological signs, including a circle and cross described almost exactly like the Zodiac one. One anonymous 1911 letter to the editor talked about the fiend who walks under the sign of the circle and cross. The phrasing made my skin crawl. I must have looked spooked when I took the printouts back, because the librarian told me, a little too casually, that special collections had older materials on the symbol if I wanted context. Special collections is basement plus, too bright, too controlled, full of heavy tables and white gloves. The librarian there said the circle cross predates the 60s and brought me a thin leather-bound book from 1896. The title was On the Influence of Celestial Characters in Ritual Language by one E.H. Pelham, 1896. Somewhere in the middle was a woodcut of a circle with a cross through it. Cruder, but the same idea. Underneath it, someone had written that this zodiac sign isn't just a horoscope symbol, used in sequence with other characters and spoken according to hidden measure. It calls down an intelligence that walks under the mark of the circle and cross and moves from man to man as the stars move from house to house. The author called them Zodiac ciphers. He said they were living sentences, each set of symbols a kind of star-born thought that, once invited, doesn't like to leave. He said the danger is less in seeing them than in repeating them, less in sight than in breath. One line from some older source he quoted stuck in my head. The mark is not on the paper, but upon the reader who knows it. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I copied the diagram. I copied the sentences. I justified it with academic language in my head. Structure, context, draw connections between historical narratives. But the truth is, I just kept going, because part of me wanted to see what would happen. On the page of my notebook, the circle cross seemed like it was tilting. Not physically, just wrong in my head, like it was leaning toward me. I stayed until my hand cramped. I didn't realize how long I'd been there until Sophie texted, full caps, that she'd brought Wendy's and I was disrespecting the fries. I sent her a picture of the book and the symbol. She wrote back, "Absolutely not. Leave that where it belongs and get your butt home." I brought the feeling with me anyway. The fight happened 2 days later. I walked into our room to find Sophie in the middle of it. She was pissed, holding her hair script like it was contaminated. She asked me if I thought this was funny. Every page was covered in my handwriting. Not notes, not underlines. The same line over and over, in margins and between stage directions. This is the Zodiac. Sometimes ending with speaking, sometimes with I am here. Soph, I started, then stopped. Because I had. I remembered sitting on the couch, the script in my lap, pen in my hand, telling myself I'd just underline her cues. And then, nothing. A jump cut, time gone. She told me those were her only notes, that tech was coming, that I'd wrecked them. I told her I didn't remember doing it. She said I was scaring her. That was the part that hurt. Because she was right, I was scaring me too. It felt like my hand and my brain had been divorced for the afternoon, like I'd been used as a printer. She said either I stopped, or she would go to Halperin and tell him something was wrong. She didn't care if that meant my grade tanked. She cared whether I was losing my mind, She left the script on my bed. I stared at the words on the cover. This is the Zodiac. I swear the letters looked pleased. The night I finished my first full draft, the bruise in my chest stopped aching. Relief should have followed. It didn't. It felt like having a warning alarm suddenly cut mid-scream. My walls were covered in ciphers like manic wallpaper. My laptop screen glowed with paragraphs that moved in and out of my own voice, sometimes clinical, sometimes a little too theatrical. Between the research and the timeline, sentences I didn't remember typing had slipped in. Maybe the Zodiac was never a man but a costume anyone could put on. Maybe the ciphers weren't codes to be solved, but spells to be cast. I told myself it was just the theater kid in me speaking, but I left them in. I wrote about the headlines from the 60s and 70s, the earlier murders, the Pelham book, the idea of Zodiac ciphers as living sentences. I wrote that the thing we call Zodiac didn't start in the 60s. It's older, patient, happy to wait and change masks. I wrote that staring, copying, breath, those were the engine. You don't just solve a puzzle, you build a door. I had one blank page left, clean, white, waiting. I'd been saving the Z340 for last, the unsolved celebrity of the ciphers, Reddit's favorite chew toy, the one people have practically ruined their lives over trying to solve. I dipped my pen. My hand moved faster than I wanted it to. As I wrote the symbols, the air in the room thickened, like humidity without heat. Shadows in the corners seemed to pool, like someone had deepened them with a brush. The desk lamp felt wrong. The light wasn't landing on the page. It bent around it, like the paper was the center of some invisible lens. In the back of my mind, Larkin's voice said, "Don't read them out loud." I didn't. I whispered. The sounds came easy this time. My tongue knew where to go like it had been practicing without me. Clicks, hisses, sliding bits of not language that still felt meaningful. My breath fogged in front of my lips like it was cold, even though the room was not. Behind me, the floor creaked, slow, heavy, step by step, like someone was standing there, shifting their weight. I kept writing. When I drew the final symbol, the circle and cross, something in the air aligned. The room didn't shake, no thunder. It was smaller than that. It felt like a room full of people inhaling together before a show starts. Then a voice spoke, not out loud, inside, like it had been printed on the inside of my skull, and someone finally flipped the ink visible. "I am here." I turned around. He was, not in the mirror, not in a reflection, in my doorway. The thing was boxy and almost stupid, like someone had stretched black fabric over a stack of cereal boxes. The symbol on his chest glowed softly, like it had its own backlight. The eye holes were nothing but layered dark. He didn't feel like anger or hunger. He felt like attention, focus, being studied. My body should have screamed, fight, flight, something. Instead, I felt calm. Theater brain kicked in first. It felt like stepping into a scene I'd rehearsed in my sleep. I told him he wasn't real. It came out of my mouth automatically. In my head, layered voices answered. The tape voice, Larkin's voice, newscasters, panicked callers, all of them braided together. "You made me real." I asked who he was. He didn't say Zodiac straight out. He didn't need to. The symbol on his chest pulsed. He implied that names are masks, and humans love masks. I wear many. Claudia, student, actor, journalist. He's worn plenty himself. And then it hit me like a fast-cut montage. Not memories. Not mine. Glimpses. Someone walking on a dark road in 1968, humming. A cab interior. A barn in 1923 with the circle chalked on the wall. A painter's studio in 1911. A Victorian alley slick with something. Different hands. Different cities. Same hood. Same mark. Same moment hovering in all of them like a chorus note. That slide from curiosity into fear. I told him he possessed them. He said they invited him. Every letter writer, every cryptography nerd, every cop who stayed late at his desk alone with the symbols, every podcast fan replaying the ciphers. He said my research My copying, my whispering, my article, my tape. All of that was me turning the knob. Then he touched me with the pen, right in the center of my chest, where the dream bruise had been. It was cold, bone cold. And then it wasn't pressing on anything anymore. It was inside me, like the space behind my sternum wasn't solid. There was no pain, no blood, no breaking or tearing, no horror movie moment. Just this sensation of something slipping into a silence that had been waiting for it. In my head, every cipher I'd looked at collapsed into one sound, a chord made of symbols. For a second I saw myself from above, small, hunched over a desk, eyes wide. Then that view folded inward, like a stage set being struck, until everything that was just me suddenly had more rooms in it. He didn't take over. Not exactly. He layered on, like a transparent mask laid over my thoughts. I could feel him behind them, like an understudy who knows all the lines and is ready to step in whenever the lead falters. Outside my room, Sophie's door opened. She called my name and complained that I was talking to myself again and that it was 3 a.m. I turned toward the sound. In the mirror on my dresser, my reflection lagged again. For one heartbeat, the hood looked back instead of my face. The symbol burned where my t-shirt should be. Then it snapped back. Just me. Hair a mess. Ink on my hands. My voice sounded normal when I apologized to her and told her I was just finishing the article. Maybe a little lower, fuller. She told me to get some sleep and made another brittle joke about serial killer ghosts. I smiled. My chest felt warm where the invisible mark sat. When I whispered too late, she didn't hear it. The next day I turned my draft in. Halperin loved it, said it was ambitious and a little theatrical, but in a good way. He forwarded it to some podcast producer who emailed back, asking if I'd be willing to record a narration to go with the tape clips. She'd especially liked the mythos angle. Of course I said yes. In the studio, they gave me big, over-ear headphones and a mic that made me sound more like myself than I ever have in my own ears. My voice came through lower and smoother than I expected. When we got to the section about the ciphers, the producer asked if I'd be okay reading some of the unsolved one. Just a few lines. They could distort it later for legal, don't freak out the fans reasons. A week earlier, I would have hesitated. I would have seen Larkin's face in that diner. I would have thought about Sophie holding her ruined script. I would have remembered the pen passing through my chest. Instead, I smiled and said sure. The paper in front of me had the cipher printed nice and clear, but I didn't look at it. The sounds are just there now. Easy. Natural. They sit on my tongue like lines from a show you've been running for weeks. We did 3 takes. On the last one, the lights in the sound booth flickered for a second, just like in the archive. No one commented. I'm starting to realize how much humans will ignore if you don't name it out loud. When I left the building, the city felt different. Not louder, not busier, just full, the way a lung feels full. Every person at the crosswalk, every car, every lit window. It all felt like marks on a stage diagram. Places to stand, entrances, exits, like I could see invisible blocking lines painted under everyone's feet. Sophie called while I was waiting for the light. She wanted to know how it had gone. I told her it was amazing, that they were going to air it next month. She called me a podcast star and said when I was done being haunted, I needed to help her deal with the director's notes. She asked if I was okay because I sounded different. I told her I just hadn't slept. Promised I'd nap before rehearsal. She said, "You're no good to me half dead." I laughed. If she heard the extra echo in it, the extra notes under my own voice, she didn't say anything. You probably clicked into this expecting a Reddit post made by some chick claiming to have finally solved the Zodiac case. You want the neat version. I find a hidden confession, a stray hair, a photograph, something that finally pins it on one guy forever. Arthur Lee Allen, probably. Maybe I exonerate him. Maybe I point to somebody else and hand you that sweet narcotic feeling of closure. That's not the story I found. What I found is older and worse. It doesn't care who you think did it. It doesn't care about suspects or timelines. It doesn't even care that much about the bodies, if I'm honest. It cares that you're reading this. What I found lives in ink and paper and hissy old tape and scanned PDFs and Reddit threads and comment sections and books from 1896 that nobody but weird grad students and cursed undergrads pull off the shelf. It uses attention the way we use oxygen. Every time someone pores over those ciphers, tracing the symbols, thinking about them, whispering them, trying to be the one who finally cracks the code, it's like knocking. There wasn't a Zodiac killer. There were men who put the hood on, yes. In the 60s, and before that too. Under different names, different headlines. The Fiend under the sign, the Circle and Cross Man, whatever Pelham politely refused to spell out. There were the people who never actually killed anyone, but got close enough in their heads that something moved into the space behind their eyes anyway. The ones whose lives shrank down to letters and theories until something else was driving. I know who Zodiac is now. It's the thing that watches you when you scroll past that symbol on your phone and tell yourself you're not into true crime. You're just curious. It's the little shiver of pleasure you feel when you say, "We'll never know," but still read every new article. It's the voice that tells you you're smarter than the cops, that you'll be the one to finally crack the cipher. It's the hood shape your brain fills in at the corner of your mirror in the dark. There wasn't one Zodiac, there were dozens. And now there's me. I found the hood folded in the bottom drawer of my dresser, on top of old jazz tights. Black, heavy, stiff in a way fabric shouldn't be. I don't remember buying it or making it. Hell, I don't remember ever owning it. But when I touched it, it warmed under my fingers like it recognized me. Beneath it sat a gun and a box of bullets I had no memory of owning. I should have panicked, but I didn't. I just felt aligned, like everything had finally snapped into place. Lovers lanes in 2025, please. Nobody parks under the stars anymore. They match in apps, meet in bathrooms, disappear between notifications. Good thing symbols travel just fine through screens. Consider this my first letter. This is the Zodiac speaking.